Welcome to Movies We Like, part of the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network. I'm Andy Nelson. No Pete Wright today, unfortunately, but he'll be back next time. On today's episode, we have invited production designer Yôhei Taneda to talk about Kenji Mizoguchi's Ugetsu, a movie he likes. Welcome to the show, Yôhei.
Hi, I'm happy to be here.
Before we get into Ugetsu and talk about that fantastic film, let's talk a little bit about you and your career. So in the scope of like working as a production designer, when you were young, like what was it that triggered you to go, oh, production design in film, that's what I want to do?
美術大学の oil painting
It started while I was a student at art school, art university. I was in a oil painting course. And when I was 20 years old, there was a Japan and France cooperative movie being made by the director Terayama. And I was asked to paint the background for the set, the wall of the set. I really had a very good experience at that time, and also the communication with the staff and everybody, and I really felt comfortable in that setting. And so as a student, I continued that, and after graduating as well. The first movie was called China Doll, and that was the Japan and France production. And it starred the actor Klaus Kinski, the German actor.
That's a fun way to get started, working with Klaus Kinski, I can imagine.
Yes, I remember he wanted to eat some cakes, so I had to go and buy him some.
Oh. So you're doing a little more than artwork on that one, that you're also doing some PA work, it sounds like.
Yes, I was just an intern at that point, so I was happy to do anything.
That got you onto set and you started getting an understanding of like how a production worked and all of that. But obviously the art department is a world in and of itself. There's a lot of stuff going on in the art department. There's a lot of layers. There's production design, art director, set decorator, all of the other individual elements in there. I know you didn't start out as a production designer, and I know you're credited as art director on a number of things. What was your path? Like once you got onto a set and you met some people who were in the art department, like, how did you start figuring out the specific part within the art department that you actually wanted to do?
日本においてはその頃映画の産業がハリウッドみたいに充実してなかった。
At the time, the movie industry in Japan wasn't as developed as the Hollywood industry. And so there weren't as many staff or people that could actually work in the industry. And so in my 20s, I was lucky enough that if we had small productions done by maybe the younger directors, I'd be able to join as a production designer. And for maybe the larger productions, I would be asked to step in as an assistant art director. So during the 20s, I was lucky enough to sort of experience those two sides of art department.
When you're an art director, a production designer, anyone in the artistic world that's helping kind of create the visual space that we see on the screen, there's obviously, you're working very closely with the director. You're working closely, potentially also with the director of photography, and figure out like how is the camera going to be capturing what you're putting in front of it. Likewise, probably the costume designer. Like there are a lot of these creative departments that you're kind of working in collaboration with to help build this world. When you're thinking about like what it takes to find the right look for a film, how do you get into the specifics? Like, I mean, you're going to talk to the director and get the specifics from them, but then like after that, like, what are your steps as far as like pinpointing the world that you're going to create?
多分、若い頃は、企画とストーリーを思い描いて、そこに
Probably when I was younger,
と一緒に走ってるっていう気
it
持ち
was
で
more
やってた
about trying to keep up with the director or working alongside with the director and keeping on our feet and thinking as we go along the overall story and the production as a whole. So in that sense, we were creating as we went along. As I've gotten older and have more movies in my career, I've been able to start more earlier in the process to talk with the directors and imagine sort of the whole world of the movie itself and how that movie can succeed in what sort of universe that we create within that movie. So in that process, we'll be talking with the director on the actual image of what needs to be done. And then we'll sort of collaborate on what sort of ideas need to go into the director's idea and then my ideas and how to incorporate all of that into the world. For my part, trying to make it sort of a world that we haven't seen before in other movies, a new sort of world to introduce to the audience. So from there, I'm able to sort of plan out how to sort of develop that world. I guess the important thing is the balance of the scenes within the movie and how all those scenes will balance out in the end to create the world that I have or that we're thinking of. Sometimes it's about contrast between blue and red, or maybe if this scene is black, then maybe we do white. These sort of ideas that we come up with. And it's a bit abstract at the moment, but that's sort of the overall sort of thinking.
Yeah, sure. No, I get that. Well, let's use a specific example. One of the films, the American films that you worked on was Kill Bill Volume 1 with Quentin Tarantino, and just looking at a scene like the I'm forgetting now the name of the bar where they go at the end, the final fight with Oren Ishii. But that bar, like, that's a pretty elaborate 2-story set with a dance floor, and you've got a kitchen and bathrooms, and then there's there's the meeting room upstairs. There's the back area that's this little the snowy garden in the back. And I don't know, I guess I'm curious, this part of my question is, I don't know if Quentin Tarantino specifically planned on showing part of that in black and white, or the censors or he did that per the MPA to release it that way, which, because I know that if you look at the Whole Bloody Affair, it's all in color. So in the scope of putting something like, as an example, just a set like that, there's a lot of pieces that are moving. You obviously also have to allow for stunt performers, wire rigs. There's a lot of cleanup because there's a lot of blood that you have to deal with on your sets. Just walk us through the process of thinking how to put together a set like that.
The set is the House of Blue Leaves.
House of Blue Leaves. Thank you. I couldn't believe I just watched that the other night and I couldn't remember it.
No problem. But 一言で話すのは難しい。
Yeah, it's very difficult to say in one word, obviously, because it's a process that develops or evolves as I'm talking with the director, Tarantino. But in this case, from the beginning, originally, he spoke about where he wanted the bar, the dance floor, the toilet, and there's a room upstairs on the second floor, and if you go open the door, there'll be a garden. So that was sort of the original idea. But from there, as I was sort of developing it on my side, I was thinking about how Tarantino likes the Japanese movies, old Japanese movies. He's a big fan of the B-class action movies or the samurai movies. So I wanted to incorporate aspects of those sort of old movies. For example, opening the sliding doors and revealing a completely different world, a world of snow, actually. That was a type of thing done in the old movies in the 60s, the Japanese classics. And so that sort of set work. 40 years on from there, Tarantino is like that sort of style. And then it's not something that was current at the time. So that was the end result that we came up with after all the developments that went on. This also leads to our discussion later about Ugetsu, but I think it comes from the fact that both of us had sort of a respect for the old movies, and obviously having that respect, we sort of use that for the development of the movie. And that was really a point that the both of us shared respect for old Japanese movies.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it shows when you see the film. And Tarantino, yeah, he is one of those filmmakers who definitely taps into a lot of his film library, like the encyclopedic knowledge he has in his head of film history through a lot of different countries and the films that they've produced. And so you can see that when you watch this, and you have a lot of those little elements that feel like tied into kind of cinema history with a lot of what he likely saw in Japanese films. What just as a question with like the set, did there, when you go into the garden, there's that fantastic pool there with the little water feature, with the little, as it flows, it fills up the bucket and then it kind of dunks and everything. And that was a fantastic element within the production, because it's auditory first. You only hear it before you get to see it. And then when you finally see it, you're like, oh, that's what's been making that noise this whole time. It's such a fascinating design. Was that something that you came up with? Like, what was the process of coming up with that little fountain that was going to be like an auditory cue over the course of that scene?
Yes, that is called a shishi odoshi, and it appears in many sort of classic Japanese films or yakuza movies. And the translation for shishi odoshi, the Chinese characters is dear and surprising. So it's to sort of keep away sort of animals or the deer, basically. It's a sound, yeah. In terms of the lake itself, the pond, that was my idea. I wanted something in the garden, not in the center, but set aside maybe a third of the distance. And there's also a lake in the restaurant, the Bloody Lake. Yeah, it's on the dance floor. But both of those lakes were my idea. I wanted to have the two lakes in the shot. And while we were rehearsing, Tarantino came up to me and said, "Oh, I forgot one thing." And you know, in the Japanese movies, they have that thing that goes kakung, kakung. I want that in the lake. And we were already rehearsing, so we had to quickly make it and go back to rehearsals. But he had watched Japanese movies and really wanted to use that in one of his movies. So we really had to sort of quickly assemble that and put it on the set. And I remember that as one of my memories from that movie. Yes, in actual real life, they're quite rare. We don't see them too often, mainly because of the noise they make. So it's not sort of a major feature of all the gardens in Japan. But so it is rare to see. But from Tarantino's point of view, the sound, the auditory aspect that you mentioned, that does come up in a lot of the Japanese old movies. It does happen in the movies. So Tarantino really wanted that in one of his films. Yes.
Sound.
Yeah, right. That's so funny. Well, that's interesting that you also mentioned the one that's inside, because that one gets really bloody, like as people fall into it and everything. What part of your job is obviously, resetting after after a scene is over. Like, what is your process with that? Do you have to like drain it all out and refill it every time you're resetting that thing?
映画の思い出も僕の仕事じゃないんですけども、血の掃除
Well, for that set itself, it wasn't my job.
掃除する人間たちが
There was a specific blood cleaning team that were hired just specifically for that job. And after each cut, they would drain out the water and make everything clean, reset everything. So this was done over and over. So we had bloody and then clean, bloody and clean. And at the end of the day, obviously they had to clean up everything and reset everything again. I guess this isn't just for this movie, but any action films. This is what happens.
Yeah,
you
sure.
destroy things and you reset them. From my point of view, we were doing this every day, and it was a lot of fun for me. I was on set being able to see what I had created slowly being destroyed. The stairs, the tables, everything that was on set. And from my point of view, it was really fun, exciting. It was more sort of like an ecstasy on my part.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. That's the life of a production designer. Or, you're creating all this wonderful stuff just for them to destroy. I suppose that's part of it.
Yes, in the end, all sets are destroyed.
Yeah,
it's just a matter of timing, whether it's quick or maybe at a later date.
Right. Well, I mean, you've worked with Tarantino a few times. You worked on Kill Bill Volume 1. You also worked on The Hateful Eight. You've done big, like, period films. Like you worked on The Flowers of War. That was one of Zhang Yimou's films. That was a really interesting film that took place in the 30s. You've done big fantasy films like the two Monster Hunt films, and so it's a variety of types of projects. Do you find that you're drawn to any particular specific type more, like period pieces or fantasy pieces? Is there something that piques your curiosity more?
僕にとっては、時代劇だろうが SF だろうが、仮に現代劇だろうが、ファンタジーフィルムだろうが。
From my point of view, whether it be period piece, science fiction, or even a present something or fantasy, they're all the same from my point of view. I do not split them into sort of different types or anything like that, even if they're from different eras or anything. I consider them real fantasies. So I don't aim to do sort of authentic period pieces. Whether it's in the present, I want my audience to see something that they've never seen before or experience something they've never seen before. So they'll be seeing something for the first time, something they haven't seen before. It's a world of fantasy, but it's also real. And sometimes I work on some animated films as well. Even in that sense, I work on the same basis as that. So whatever the type of film, it's all the same. It's all about creating art from my point of view. So I don't differentiate. There's no difference in all of that.
You mentioned in there the idea of working on some animated films. When Marnie Was There, the fantastic Studio Ghibli film you worked on, you also were working on the Ghost in the Shell, Innocence, I believe. And so what is the process as a production designer? And I guess just explaining the world of being a production designer when you go from the physical set to going to an animated film. Are you just like directing the animators, like this is what I want the house in When Marnie Was There to look like? Like, what's your thought process?
From my point of view, I have an architectural background. So moving from live action to the world of animation, I have knowledge of architectural space. From that point of view, obviously we start out with ideas on 2D level. From there, I will create a 3D model. And with that 3D model, I can have meetings with the director and the animators about the actual movement within the movie. And more recently, the 3D models, we can make a virtual world in the computer. And so we can walk through the actual set in that sort of virtual world, scene by scene. So I'm able to construct sort of architecturally within sort of that world of animation. Of course, in animation, you're free to design whatever you want. But with my background, I'm able to incorporate using that live action or the virtual world that we have. I'm able to show the director exactly what the worlds will look like. And architecturally, I have that knowledge. So I'm able to go into more of the actual construction of the world and even the finer details within that world. From that point of view, everything comes together better if I'm able to discuss that with the director. In a sense, doing live action and animation, I might have two different ways of approaching. When I'm doing a live action movie, I'm aiming to do something like a painting within the frame, which is a still painting. But when I'm doing animation, I'm trying to create something that looks like not a painting, but something that's live. So it's sort of doing the reverse within those two different areas. Yes, and actually I'm working on an animation feature at the moment as well. I can't provide any details.
Well, I mean, clearly the work that you create is exciting and fantastic and really allowing for the filmmakers to have a world for their stories to take place in. And it's a very important role in the film industry, and it's exciting to see what you do in your career. But I think this is a good time to shift our conversation away from all the wonderful stuff you've been doing, but to turn our attention over to Mizoguchi's Ugetsu and talk a little bit about that fantastic ghost story. So with that, oh, sorry, rearrange the room. Yep, change the set. Just like a production designer.
Yep. Okay. Change the set.
All right. Yep. Perfect. So let's jump into this movie. My first question for you, Kenji Mizoguchi crafts some very beautiful films. They're beautiful. The stories are beautiful. The world that he creates in them are fantastic. And this is Ugetsu is based on several stories in the book Ugetsu Monogatari by Ueda Akinari. How did you come to this film? Had you read the book ever, or was it did you first see the film when you were young? Do you remember the first time that you kind of came to this story?
覚えてます。映画が最初です。
Yes, I do remember. It was the film, and it was during my university days. Back then, they used to do movies, two movies in one session. And I saw this in Meigaza. It's just a very small theater. But at that time, it was Ugetsu and Sancho the Bailiff. And it was a very cheap and small sort of theater with very bad conditions. But nonetheless, I saw both of the movies. And from my point of view, at that stage, as a Japanese film, they seemed like fantasy for me. They were very beautiful, but very scary at the same time. So beautiful, scary movie. From that point of view, I did sort of get a big inspiration from those two movies.
Well, it's a fascinating story because it's a ghost story, but it doesn't start where it feels like a ghost story at all, right? It feels like we're watching a film about war in the 16th century in a small town. We're just with a couple farmers and their wives, and one of them is a ceramicist also and makes these beautiful pots. And that's kind of the story we initially have. And it seems like what we're going to be watching is a story about the farmers who, like everybody in their village, is afraid of the war coming to them, basically. And one of the farmers realizes, how much money he can make during wartime by selling his ceramics, and kind of gets his eyes just kind of get big. And he goes off to the city to sell all of his ceramics because he knows he can make a lot of money. And so it feels like we're watching a film about family during war and the struggles. Really, a lot of the film deals with the struggles between husbands and wives, and really how a war affects both sides of that. But it's then once we're in the town, then suddenly we get this shift. And as one of them is wooed by this woman who, as we find out, is this ghost. I was not familiar with the story beforehand. Had you heard the story beforehand? Were you aware that he was walking into this trap with this ghost, or did it come as a big surprise to you that that's where the story was going?
まずストーリーは知らなかったです。その雨月物語の原作は、結構古典的で現代人。
No, I didn't know the story myself. The original story is quite old. It's not something that people at the time knew. And so I didn't really know the story beforehand, before watching the movie. In Japan, there aren't that many sort of fantasy films, but ghosts, there has been a tradition of ghost stories. They call them kaidan films. But Mizoguchi, he did probably 2 ghost stories. One of them was a silent film. The negative got burned, so it doesn't exist anymore. And the other one was Ugetsu. Mizoguchi is known for his dealings with females or women in his movies. So I believe Ugetsu is special in the sense that it deals with women and also fantasy, sort of the ghost aspect.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. And just speaking to the side of the women as we watch this story, we do spend quite a bit of time with the wives as we see what's going on with them, right? We've got Genjuro, who is the ceramicist. He ends up with the enchantress, but his wife and child are trying to survive, and he kind of leaves them in a really awful predicament where they have to figure out how to make their way back home, and they end up getting accosted by bandits, and it's just terrible. And then, of course, by the time we get to the end, we realize the tragedy that actually befell her, and it's awful. At the same time, we're also following his brother-in-law Tobei, who wants to be a samurai. He has ambitions for something greater, and doesn't listen to his wife. He runs off. It's just like running off and joining the circus, right? He wants to go and do this thing. And he, with everything he does, he goes and does that, again, leaving his wife behind. And likewise, she gets accosted and ends up becoming, essentially selling herself. And of course, that's the most, one of the two main tragedies of the film, when he ends up at the brothel and finds that his wife is there, right? It's a shock, but that's a big part of this story, is how Mizoguchi follows these women and gives their stories such prominence in what we're watching unfold, and just how heartbreaking it is when the family, the men aren't thinking of the family and what they have in front of them. They're just dreaming of something much bigger, and it in both cases leads to great tragedy.
はい。一つ、話したいことがあります。
Yes, there's one point I'd like to talk about.
今、
The T-shirt that you're wearing has the title of Kurosawa's film.
Yes,
Right?
it's got all of them on
全
there.
部入ってます。
Good.
Yeah, there you go.
で、はい、僕は、
全部入ってます。
Good. で、僕
I
は
love Kurosawa's films,
それが大好き
and I've rewatched
理解して
all of the films over and over,
してます。
and I do use those films as inspirations for my own work. And sort of the opposite to Kurosawa, I believe, stands Mizoguchi on the same level. For example, if we say Kurosawa is the Japanese John Ford,
一つの例えで言
I
う
would
と、
say Mizoguchi is the Japanese Hitchcock.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Interesting.
Yes, we have the famous Seven Samurai movie for Kurosawa, which deals with yes, Seven Samurai, pre-feudal period with poor farmers.
Right. Yeah.
And at the same time, Ugetsu is from the same era, dealing with poor farmers as well. We have two movies that have same sort of elements, but completely different stories.
True.
で、
Yeah.
黒沢は世界に通用するような
When he was making Seven Samurais, he was trying to create something that would be acceptable throughout the world, become a hit filled with action and drama, something that audiences around the world would be able to appreciate. In contrast with that, according to some, he had no thought of creating any sort of anything entertaining for the audience. That wasn't his goal. What he wanted to do was create Eastern magic or Eastern beauty. He wanted to do the ultimate sort of art in that sense. And so we have sort of same elements that I mentioned before, but the development of that comes with a completely different story.
Well, and I think that's really interesting because they both clearly use elements of different parts of kind of Japanese history in these kind of paired stories that we're looking at, how the same period and everything, but this one feels so different, and it's obviously a different director, different type of story, and Mizoguchi is going for something different with the story that he's telling here. But I do think it's interesting looking at the film not as a film necessarily designed for audiences or mass audiences, however you want to describe it, but a film that is designed to capture something like the essentially kind of like Japanese that feels, like he's capturing a piece of something. And I think that's an interesting element that we have here. And maybe that's also something, another film of his, The Story of the Last Chrysanthemum, it feels very much like kind of the theater is the way that film plays. Likewise here, when we do see Lady Wakasa, her look ties into that no theater kind of that style, which is definitely more stylized than anything Kurosawa was doing.
美術的に言うと、七人の侍の
From an art department sort of point of view, the art for the Seven Samurai, the village, and all the aspects within that are made for the action sequences. So everything will lead to the final scene where all the action takes place in the rain. That's what it's designed for. But for Ugetsu, the sets are completely different. Ugetsu is a story about an artist. The main character, Genjiro, he creates ceramics and sells his pottery. But obviously, he has a talent for making the art. Within the film, Wakasa says that your pottery is so beautiful. If he wasn't talented, obviously Wakasa wouldn't make that sort of comment. So we know within the film that he does have some sort of talent as an artist. At the same time, being a poor farmer, he does have talent as an artist. The other main character is Tobe, but he just wants to be a samurai, which is different. Genjiro, he, as an artist, wants to go after sort of beautiful things, art, things of beauty. For example, there's one scene where he goes to buy a kimono. Within that scene, he's looking at the fabrics. They're all very beautiful, and he's thinking in his head how the fabrics would look on his wife, Miyagi. And from there, we have the main building, the Kuchiki, which we see initially is very rundown, and sort of the paper doors of the are all torn and everything, so it's the relic really. And Kuchiki, the name of the building, that meaning is, it means rotten wood. So but once you go inside, everything is beautiful. The Kyoto style architecture within everything is very beautiful. So once you're inside, you sort of can't get out. The exterior is very run down, but the inside is very, very beautiful. Yes, and the building itself is structured like a no theater structure. So when Wakasa is moving within that, it's like watching no theater within the building. And usually with lighting, it's fixed. If it's sort of the practical light within the set, it's fixed. But for here, we have Wakasa with her candle. When the servant is holding the candle, we see it move. So we see the lighting move. We see it from dark getting lighter. So it's really like watching a no theater in action. Yes. The makeup as well is the same as no theater.
Well, I mean, all of that is it's so fascinating that that's the method that Mizoguchi chose to kind of build this world, because there are some elements that feel theatrical, I guess I could say. Like, for example, And perhaps it also fits very well with just creating a style or a sense of space that feels haunted, like for example, the lake is another sequence that is incredibly, I mean, it's beautiful, but it's really haunted the way that it's shot. It's night, it's foggy. You can kind of tell that it looks like a set, though. It doesn't feel like an actual lake, but that enhances that feel of just feeling out of place. And I think that was something so clever with the production style, because even when they're in the house, it always feels, just something always feels off in just the way it's put together.
それに関して
On that point, in the Japanese way of thinking, in terms of death and living, there's a big difference from the Seven Samurai movie. And in the Japanese thinking within living and the afterlife, the river plays a very important role. So crossing the river means going into death or the afterlife. For Japanese, that has a meaning, incorporating a river or some sort of water feature. So getting on a boat to cross the river, or in this case, the lake, can mean going into the afterlife. So within Mizoguchi's films, this does appear many times. So getting on the boat is going towards the afterlife. Having that meaning in terms of sort of crossing the river or incorporating water, that's probably why Mizoguchi built a set to actually do that scene. And it was important for him to be able to express that aspect of the way of thinking. This has been sort of copied by Martin Scorsese in his movie Silence. So it is one that has influenced other people. In terms of importance, an important element, water or a lake or a river or even an ocean, this has, as a production element, it's very important in terms of characterizing the living and the afterlife. Within that scene, we see the boat coming from the other side. The other side being the side of the dead, basically. So we see a boat coming from there, and he talks to the people saying that, it's dangerous, go back. And so based on that, everyone goes back. Going back means going back to the world of the living, the real world. But the people that get off, it's just the two, the wife and the child. I believe that scene where we have the person that's half dead, like a dead body or a ghost, is a very important aspect of that scene. It's like the entrance to the afterlife.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at that too, and seeing all of that, everything that happens after they cross the lake as an element of, dancing with the afterlife, and really kind of like where they end up. And you can see when our hero is at Lady Wakasa's house, she lives right on the lake. Like, we see the lake, they're sitting out there. So she's like, that's a hint to us that, she is not with us, so to speak. Likewise, it is the other side of the lake where his friend Tobei and his wife both kind of go down their dark paths, and they both also have to escape that and get back to the, quote, world of the living, back to their farm where they can, and again, a farm where you grow things, where life sprouts from the earth. And I think that's another bit of symbolism here as far as the way that that Mizoguchi is crafting this story. That's pretty powerful.
それで、オチが元の世界に戻ったら、そこに奥さんが幽霊であの世から待っていたっていうのがまたオチになっていて、現実世界に
Yes, that's true. The big catch to this is that when they return to the land of the living, we meet up with another ghost, actually. It's a friendly ghost. It's the wife. So we have two ghosts. One is an actual ghost, but the other, don't know if it's a ghost, but it's the wife as a spirit. And in that scene, the lighting is very well done. And the light moves, especially in the morning when the sunshine comes into the scene.
Yeah, the way that is crafted is and it's all like in one shot, right? Where he walks into their home, which is in ruins, and the camera follows him and pans as he goes out the other door and circles back around to the front door again. And as the camera comes around, the house is lit. There's a fire. She's cooking. I mean, it's beautifully done. And I actually had to rewind it. I'm like, wait, did I miss something? What just happened here? And like, no, he's in the same place here. And it was a fantastic, really kind of a dark twist. And I first walked into it, I'm like, oh, the mother and child both got killed because the kid is here too. And so it was actually an interesting twist to me that the kid actually survived and did make it, but it's just the mother, his wife, that had been killed. And it was crafted meticulously, and the way that Mizoguchi and his team, his cinematography team, and the production design team building the inside of this house to work so well with the way that it moved. I mean, it was devastating and haunting.
Yes,
and if I add to that point, Mizogushi's world in the films is like no theater, but his camera style is quite different. He uses crane shots, and the camera moves. There's a flow to his camera work. In Japanese literature, we have scroll paintings, sort of a landscape, panoramic landscape is painted on scroll, which you sort of reveal. And Mizoguchi wanted this movie to be like a scroll painting. So that's why we see a lot of panning of the camera from one side to the other. And I think this is very beautifully done. And I'd also like to talk about the DOP Miyagawa later on as well.
Well, let's do that right now. What can you tell us about the cinematographer for this one, the director of photography?
まず美術に関してはいつも一緒に組んでいる水谷博
In terms of the art within Mizoguchi's films, he's done a lot of films with the production designer Hiroshi Mizutani, but
美術家を呼んできて作らせています。それはなんかそのリアルに映画のセットを作りたいんじゃなくて、舞台美術
for this production, he's worked with a theater-based production designer, Kisaku Ito. Mizoguchi was looking for more a theatrical sort of set rather than a real set.
アキラ黒沢では羅生門をやっていて、羅生門では雨を墨で黒い雨を降らしたことで有名な人ですけど、彼は
And then the DOP Kazuo Miyagawa, his background is in ink paintings, Japanese ink paintings, and he's well known for the Black Rain in Rashomon from Kurosawa.
通常の溝口さんの映画よりもさらにその意図的な
And for Ugetsu, what he's done is he's painted the leaves black, and to make the shadows darker than they actually are, he's painted that black as well, using Japanese black ink.
Japanese black ink.
Wow. That's fascinating. That's a lot of work, a lot of extra work.
Yeah. And also, Rashomon is a very special film because the DOP is Kazuo Miyagawa. So looks a little different, Seven Samurai and Rashomon. Rashomon looks, it's like a Mizoguchi style because of DOP, I think.
Interesting. Well, and that speaks a lot too. Like, there's obviously the director's style, but each other person involved who has that creative touch, the cinematographer, the production designer, costume designer, they're also bringing their own artistic touch to the film as well, it's very important. Well, I know our time is getting tight here. I wanted to, just one last question about this film before we wrap it up. And I guess just in the broad scope, I mean, you came to this show with this being a movie that you like, one of your favorite movies. What is it about Ugetsu that keeps drawing you in, that kind of calls back to you over and over, that makes this a film that you love to return to?
理由はですね、僕の中にこう刺激するこう日本の
Yes, the reason I keep going back to it, I guess, it stirs something within me, and reminds me of Japanese sort of fairy tales or old tales that have been passed down for ages. So it sort of takes me back to my childhood when I was reading or hearing about these fairy tales, old Japanese fairy tales. And it's the fact that I can become a child again, I guess, is what brings me back. And with the more recent, when Marnie was there, within that, she also travels the ocean in a boat. So there are elements of Ugetsu within this that I was thinking of when I was creating this. So you could say that Ugetsu does actually still influence me in my work to this day.
Fascinating. I mean, that's absolutely fascinating. And I didn't even think about that, but yeah, it's another ghost story, right? It totally ties in.
Yes,
so from my point of view, from the art perspective, I'd like you to watch both of these movies to see how they compare.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be watching Ugetsu soon again for another podcast that I'm on, and so I will make sure that I pair it with When Marnie Was There. That'll be a great double feature.
Okay.
Well, Yôhei, thank you so much for joining me here today. I really appreciate it. Do you have any place online that you want to plug, a website? Or I know you can't talk about your new the film that you're currently working on, the anime film. But is there something else that's recent that you want to plug?
今発表できる最新作は Mortal Kombat.
The thing that I can actually announce is that I've been working on Mortal Kombat 2.
Oh.
We did this together, and it will be released next year.
Fantastic.
And one for Japanese film.
In terms of a Japanese film, worked on Kokuho. Don't know the English title, but the translation would be National Treasure.
Okay.
It's a Kabuki-themed movie. And Mizoguchi also did a movie regarding Kabuki, which was the Chrysanthemum movie.
The story of the last chrysanthemum, right?
Yeah, the story of the last chrysanthemum. I wanted to talk about those two movies, but if you could go and see both of those movies again.
Absolutely. We'll put those on the list for sure. Well, again, Yôhei, thank you so much. We certainly appreciate you joining us here today.
Thank you, Andy.
I'd also like to give a big thanks to Hiroshi Tominaga for being a big part of this conversation as our translator. We literally couldn't have done it without you. And for everyone else out there, we hope you like the show and certainly hope you like the movie like we do here on Movies We Like. Movies We Like is a part of the True Story FM Entertainment Podcast Network and the Next Reel family of film podcasts. The music is Chonk Clap by Out of Flux. Find the show at truestory.fm and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Letterboxd at The Next Reel. Learn about becoming a member at thenextreel.com/membership. And if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, we always appreciate it if you drop one in there for us. See you next time.